All right, section 4.3, Math Links 8. Working on percents of numbers. We're starting at question 3, and it says use mental math to determine each of the following. 300% of 2,000. Mental math strategy, since 100% is 2,000, then 300% would be tripling that, or 6,000. For B, 1% of 60. 1% of 60. 1% is, you move the decimal 2 spots, so 0.60. How do I get a quarter percent? Calvin, since you're not paying attention, I'll ask you. How do you get a quarter percent? So how much would a quarter percent be? If 1% 60 cents, what's a quarter percent? 15 cents, right? Because half of it would be 30 cents and half of that. So therefore, 1.25% is 75 cents. And question C, what's our mental math rule for a tenth of a percent? Olivia, do you remember your mental math rule for a tenth of a percent? 10% move it once, 1% move it twice, a tenth of a percent is move it 3 times. So if I move this decimal once, that's 10%, twice is 1%, 3 times. A tenth of a percent is 0.04, just like that. Question 4 says use mental math to find the following. If it asks for 20%, what are we going to find first? It's asking for 20%, but what are we going to find first? 10%. 10% of 60 is 6, because we move it in one place. So therefore, 20% would be double that, or 12. For B, 250%. 200% is doubling it, so that's 800. Calvin, how do I get 50%? How much would that be? You took the long way around that answer, but yes. So 50% is half of 100%. So therefore, 250% is 1,000. And finally, C, your last one, 10.5%. 10%. Olivia, what do I do to get 10%? Move the decimal 1 spot. So I get 10% is 10. 1%, I don't need it in my answer, but I need it to get my answer. 1%, I move it twice, is going to be 1. And therefore, 0.5%, which is half of 1%, is 0.5. So therefore, if I put my 10% and my 0.5% together, that would be 10.5%, or 10 decimal 5. 10 decimal 5. Question 5 asks us to determine the percent of each number. It does not ask us to find it mentally, so we can use a calculator for these, which is probably the wisest thing. Now, 2/5%, we've already done this earlier in a previous, sugar cubes, in a previous video. 2/5% is the same thing as 0.4%, which is the same thing as 0.4%. Okay? That mental understanding of percentages has to kind of exist in all of our brains, that 2/5% is the same thing as 0.4, that's an equivalent fraction. And all fractions can be converted to decimals either by reading them, if their denominator is 10, 100, or 1,000, or just dividing the numerator by the number. But we all know this is the same thing. So 0.4% is 0.4 out of 100, which is 4 out of 1,000, which is 0.004. That's how I change 2/5% into a decimal. So this percentage here and this decimal here are the same number. Once we know that, 2/5% of 325, we just have to multiply it. You get 0.4% of 325. 0.4% of 325 is 1.3. How many got that one right? 3 people. That's not good. Okay, let's try the next one. 15.25% is equal to 15 decimal what percent? Anybody? 15.25% is equal to 15 decimal what percent? 15.25%. That's great. Good stuff. Those are the same things. Everyone agree? 15.25%, both of them. 15.25%. Which means 15.25% as a fraction, of course, since it's a percentage instead of 100, is multiplying by 10 sufficient to create an equivalent fraction here? No. Gavin, what do I have to multiply numerator and denominator by to create an appropriate equivalent fraction? 100, because I have to move it 2 spots. So multiply my numerator and denominator by 1,000, and I get 1,525 10,000ths, which is 1,525 10,000ths. That's a lot of thinking that goes on in that particular starting point for this question. Changing that fraction, that percentage, to a decimal, involves all of that understanding. And since I'm looking for that percentage of 950, I'll just multiply it out. 15.25% of 900, that's not 900, 950 is 144.875. Your last one is 175%, which of course as a fraction is really easy because it's 175 out of 100. That's 175%, which is 1 and 7,500ths, which is 1 and 7,500ths. So to change 175% to a decimal, that's the thinking that you need to do. And 175% of $125.50 would be that. 175% of $125.50 is $219.62.5. Now, as a bonus assignment, I might ask you this question. Rewrite that as you would see it in the gas station. It would look like this: $219.62 and if we did it in lowest terms, it would like this: $219.62.5. That 5,000ths of a dollar is actually a half a cent. Right? That's 5 that exists in that. So we could write it like that if you wanted to. And our final question from this particular section is, what is the percent of each number? Give your answer to lowest 100. Question A is probably the hardest question in the whole assignment that we did, 5/8%. But you have to know that 5/8% is a fractional percent that can also be expressed as a decimal amount. How do I change 5/8 to a decimal? I take my numerator, like I said 1,000 times, divide it by your denominator, and you get 0.625%. The first thing you have to understand with A is those two things are the same thing. And once you have that, I can change that to a percent or to a fraction because it's 0.62%, 5%, which means it's out of 100. Gavin, what do I have to multiply both numerator and denominator to create an equivalent fraction that's useful? 10 will only move the decimal 1 spot. I'll end up with 6.25 out of 100. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake. Oh, no, that's right. Not 10. Anybody? Somebody said it. Not 10,000. You said every number but the right one. How many times do I have to move the decimal? 3. So what do I have to multiply it, Julius, to get rid of the decimal? To move it 3 times, what would I multiply it by? 10 is 1 spot. 100 is 2 spots. 1,000. So if I multiply it by 1,000, I'm going to move the decimal 3 times, aren't I? So I'm going to multiply it by 1,000 to get 625. But if I'm going to maintain equivalency, I got to multiply the bottom by 1,000. And just stop for a second. What's 100 times 1,000? 100,000, right? 100,000, which is 1 with 5 zeros. We've never really gone this big in terms of decimals before, but we can do this. 625 100,000ths. I'm going to put some lines here for a second. I'm even going to put some letters here just to make sure we understand this. A, B, C, D, E, F. place value. A, B, C, D, E, or F. Which one is the 100,000th position, Kylie? A, B, C, D, E, or F. 100,000th position. E is correct. So because E is your 100,000th position, this 625 has to end there. Okay? But what do I need to insert to make sure it stays where it is? A couple zeros. And I end up with 0.00625. This number here, 0.00625, is 5/8 of a percentage expressed as a decimal. Less than 1%. Okay? 5/8 of 520 would look like this. Grab my calculator. Grab my calculator. It's 3.25. Or, if it's money, $3.25. We okay with that? What's 1% of 520? Just real quick. 5.2. So 1% is 5.2. It makes sense that something that's just a little bit more than 0.5% would be 3.25, right? If 1% is 5 decimal something, then it makes sense a little bit more than half of that would be 3 decimal something. Agreed? When you just approximate it using kind of just pausing for a second and thinking about the numbers rather than doing the math. With B, 75 2/5% is equal to 75 decimal what percent? 75 2/5% is equal to 75 decimal what percent? Anybody? That's right, 75.4%. How did you get that? 2 divided by 5 is decimal 4. We've already done it 3 times so far this morning. So once we have that, we can think of 75.4% as being this fraction and being this equivalent fraction, and therefore being this decimal. That's the sunken that you need to make 75 2/5% into a decimal of 200. Should be about 150 something, 158. $150 decimally. Close. And that's your answer for that one. And finally, your last question. I know we're all excited to be done. 250% is actually the easiest one to change to a decimal because it's 250 out of 100 since it's a percentage, which is 2 and 50 hundredths, which is 2 and 50 hundredths. 250% of 76.50. 250% of $76.50 is $191.25.